YouTube friends, how are you doing? This is DIY is my happy place. I'm Amy, and today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite crafts ever, Valentine Gnomes. I made these sock gnomes all from Dollar Tree items. They don't require any sewing. They are so easy and so much fun. So, if you'd like to learn more about how to make these fun little gnomes, continue watching my video. And please give this video a like and share it out where you can. Now, let's have some fun. I decided that this time of year is the perfect time to make Valentine gnomes. And I made enough for my friends from church, some people from work. I just think everyone needs a little pick-me-up. And since I was able to pick up all the little embellishments and everything from the dollar store, it really is a gift that is very reasonably priced to make. So today I'm going to show you all the tips and tricks for making fun little gnomes. My husband asked me, "Are you going to be making gnomes for every holiday this year?" Because I made quite a few at Christmas time. And I guess the answer is yes. Every single holiday, I keep one gnome for myself. This little heart I crocheted actually, so you can get yarn from the Dollar Tree and crochet a little heart. So to make your gnome, the first thing is to start off with a sock. And I quite like the white ankle sweat socks from the Dollar Tree. You get, I think it's 3 packages for $1. So that makes, 6 gnomes? So that's pretty good. Now cut off the top, and you can cut it in half. I actually cut it in thirds. I found that cutting it in half made the arms a little bit too fat for my liking, and it was hard to curl up to hold on to my sign. So cut it in thirds. Now you're going to want to lay the sock out, add some hot glue to it, and roll it up. I use the kind of hot glue that's very hot, so you don't want your fingers to get on it. I don't know why, but I do. So anyway, just put a little hot glue along the edge, and then you just start to roll the sock up. And because my hot glue is so hot, I just fold it down and let it cool off and dry before I try rolling. Okay, so then I put some hot glue on the other end, and it's ready to roll. Now, once you get that done, set it aside while it cools and dries, and move on to the next one. A lot of times when I'm making my DIY craft videos, I will speed parts of it along just in fast motion, or even cut some of it out. But while I'm making this gnome, I decided that I'm going to do everything in real time so you can see exactly how long it takes to make the gnome. So here I am doing the second arm, gluing it just like I did the first one. And a couple of times it sticks to my table. So you do want to make sure when you're doing this that you're on a surface that glue won't be ruining. In my craft table, I actually epoxied. That's going to be another video, but it can handle hot glue. Okay, now I'm ready to fill my sock up. You can use anything to help weight it down. I have some rice left over from a previous art project that we did, so I always recycle anything that I can find. So in this case, I'm using colored rice, but anything would work. You could use wheat, you could use little pebbles, you could use the little gems that go in the bottom of flower plants, anything you'd like. It's nice to have something to help weigh down the bottom. And then the top part, I'm going to use some cotton. Now, I retired an old pillow that was past its prime, and I've been using that for my gnomes. But I will say that if you don't have a pillow that you can use the stuffing out of, it still is cheaper to buy a pillow and use the inside than to buy cotton. So that's my little tip. I think at Family Dollar you can get a pillow for $3 or whatever. So that's my tip. But generally you would have some sort of an old pillow that can be recycled. Okay, now we'll just stuff in the cotton and form the body of the gnome. And you can do these, each one can have its own little personality. Sometimes there's tall and skinny, sometimes there's short and chubby, just really however you want. But you try to get it so that it forms around the rice, so you can't tell where the rice stopped and the cotton starts. And then to top off, I use little elastic bands that I picked up from the dollar store. My granddaughters call those clippies, but they're actually elastic bands. And so you bind the top part with the elastic. Now, I always like to also use pipe cleaner because sometimes those little rubber bands, if they get touched by any hot glue along the way, they'll pop. And then they also just get old and break, and I don't want my gnome to break later, so I also add a little pipe cleaner around the top. Now, the reason why I don't just do pipe cleaner without the rubber band is the rubber band helps to get it really in a position of what I want it to look like. And then I can just wrap a little bit of pipe cleaner around, twist it on nice and tight, and that gnome is going nowhere. I always have 2 different types of scissors handy when I'm working with crafts. One is a pair of fabric scissors that I keep very sharp, and one pair of scissors that can cut wires. And never interchange them or your fabric scissors will no longer cut your fabric. Little tip of the day. Now, you can pick up 4 ping pong balls for $1 at the dollar store. I actually have picked up ping pong balls at other places, but I'm just saying you can get them at the dollar store. And then you take a pair of knee-high pantyhose. I think they come 3 pairs for $1. And I've used the same package for all my gnomes. So you just cut off and use your little clippies or elastic bands to bind it up. And then in this case, I also add a pipe cleaner just to make sure that the nose doesn't pop later on. And I am going to be gluing that on, so I don't need the elastic popping. Now, you'll notice that on this particular pantyhose, I'm really getting to the tail end of it. And you can still see a bit of a line because it's at the very top of the pantyhose. But that part will be covered up with the hat, so it doesn't matter. Now you want to add some glue. You want your nose to be almost in the center, just a little bit above center of the gnome. So what I do is I add a nice amount of glue, put my nose on, and set it aside. Let it just dry, rather than having it sitting up and me holding it to dry. Okay, let's talk about the hat. I picked up a bunch of different gloves and socks and whatever from the dollar store because, like I say, I plan on making Easter gnomes and Valentine gnomes, and so I just picked up a bunch of the socks because once winter's over, those socks are going to be a thing of the past. And I'm going to make this one out of gloves today rather than sock. I wanted to show you how you can either use a glove or a sock. Now, the beauty about using gloves is I can cut off the very tips of the fingers, and I can use those for the little mittens. Now, if you don't use a sock, then you can make mittens out of little pom-poms, or there's little foam balls you can get from the dollar store, or there's, you can just cut off a piece of fabric and stuff it. It doesn't matter. But in this case, I'm going to use the tips. Now, I want to add some paper towel in a ball, and I use the thumb because that's the best positioned area to make the little pom-pom that goes on the end of the hat. And wrap that around with some elastic. And that one is not going to be glued, so I can leave the elastic. And then I just add some more stuffing to the top of the hand to help form the top of the head. Now, don't worry about those fingers. We're going to tuck those in. That's going to be just fine. And it doesn't have to be perfect up there yet till after you get done tucking in your fingers. Okay, so tuck the fingers in behind, use my handy dandy elastic, and tie them down. Now, I came across the way to hold those down kind of in a weird way. I wanted to use different trim around the top of the hat, and I picked up some pink ribbon from the dollar store to use for around the hat. And I found that it was pink. It's the same color as the glove, and I couldn't even see it on there. So I switched it over and started using it to hold down the fingers instead. And it works perfect. So first thing you want to do is add a little glue, and then we're going to just set it aside while it dries. And once that's completely dried on there, then I can bind it up and really make those fingers disappear. So we're going to set that aside, and I'll start putting my little mittens on the ends of my arms. Now, it really does, this is one of the easiest little parts. Just add some glue to the end, and you make sure that you get the part that has the elastic, and then it looks like the cuff of the sleeve of your arm. Put some glue on, add your little fingertip, and your mitten is ready to go. It is so easy. Now, if you don't have something, fingers that you cut off, you can just add a little ball, or you can put some stuffing in on a piece of fabric and bind it down with an elastic. But I find that those can end up taking up time. So, okay, I love adding bracelets. I picked up these little beads from the dollar store, put them onto a wire, and made myself a little bracelet. I love making jewelry, so of course my gnomes need a bracelet. So I'll set that aside while my arms are drying. Now my hat has dried enough that I can finish binding up the ribbon around the fingers of my hat. And I'll glue those down nice and tight, and the fingers from the glove just disappear into my ribbon. And it's crazy to me how just putting the elastic around the paper towel makes that end look like it's a great big pom-pom. I did learn how to make pom-poms, but they take a little while, and this works out just as well. Okay, now let's put our little bracelet on the arm. My glue isn't quite dry around there, but I was a little bit impatient, so I went ahead and started putting my bracelet on, and then my arm started to fall apart. So you do have to be a little bit more patient than that, but that is what it's going to look like. Cute little bracelet. I don't know. That just becomes one of my favorite parts of the gnome. Okay, now let's go back to our main body. We want to, see, I got a little hot glue on my table, but it just pops right off with the epoxy. Okay, now you want your arm to be pretty long. You don't want it to touch the ground, but hang down pretty far because it needs to be able to wrap around the sign. So put some hot glue up there. Now I'm glad I have some elastic in case I bump into it. I have that elastic around the top that also has pipe cleaner, and let that dry. Once again, I'll set it aside and move on to the next thing while it's drying. Now, let's talk about the hair. I have used a couple of things. You can either use a mop, or you can use the dusters, depending on what look. If you use the mop, the best thing to do is it takes about 3 strands per braid, and you want to unravel them and then braid them. But today, I'm going to use the duster on this one. Now, I've used this duster for a beard. I've used it for other, so like one duster makes a lot of gnomes. So I'm going to cut the edges of this duster. And the way that I'm cutting him, the parts that I'm using, I'm getting down to the last of my duster. So when I cut it and make it that small of a braid, it kind of makes it pretty fragile. There's quite a bit of the cotton that's about to fall off of it. But as long as it's hanging on one side, that's the main thing, because I can glue those little braids right down onto the body. So the cotton won't be going anywhere. But I do need something to show that it's a braid. So I need to use some sort of ribbon or twine or something around the very bottoms. And you want to put this on before you put it on your gnome. And I had some wire ribbon left over from something. Now again, whenever you're cutting your wire, you want to use the wire scissors, not your fabric scissors, so it doesn't ruin your fabric scissors. But I'm just going to use this. You really could use just about anything. You could use a piece of fabric, you could use twine, whatever looks like the right color for the gnome you're going with. I'm going to use just a little piece of the wire end, and then I can just wrap it around and I don't have to glue it or try to tie it into a bow or any of that. Some of that can be a little bit hard because it's so tiny where you're working. But again, I have just glued on fabric before. Anything goes here. So in this case, I'm going to just put one on each side. And as I was putting this on, I realized, yeah, this cotton is really kind of coming apart on my duster. And so it's a good thing I plan on gluing the whole thing down. And then it'll look just like it's supposed to. Okay, good. I have two braids and part of it's starting to come apart, and that's when I realized, yeah, we're gluing this whole thing down. Sometimes I leave the braids so that they're kind of dangling along, but in this case I'm just gluing the whole thing to the front body of my gnome. And so I'll just place that on there. Cotton absolutely loves to grab hot glue, so very simple. I can trim up whatever pieces are sticking out weird later, but I'll just initially get it all glued down nice and solid to my gnome. Now, if you want it to be a male gnome, you just cut it off and make a beard underneath the nose. But I only have a few male gnomes. I'm generally doing little girl gnomes to go to all my friends. Okay, now we want to put an embellishment on the belly. I found these hearts at the dollar store, and I really planned on making some cute little felt Valentine hearts. And then I found these that were already made, and they had the little gem on them. I'm like, yeah, no reason to reinvent the wheel when the dollar store makes them. 25 for $1, already done. They're in red and pink, all in one package. Now let's talk about the feet. I use these chalkboard tags. They do have a hole around the very top, so I just put a piece of paper that I used a black marker and marked it up and glued it on so it would disappear. And then once it's all taped down and glued onto the gnome, you really don't see it. But if that hole was still there, you would notice a little hole. Now you give a generous amount of glue on the back side, plop your gnome down, and let it dry. And now it's got cute little feet underneath. Now, again, I will need to trim up my braids a little bit, but for now, they're looking pretty good. Gotta let the glue dry before I worry about the final stage of the braids. Okay, we're moving along. We're getting close. Okay, now you can get these little tags from the dollar store, and I did go ahead and print out my sayings. I've written on some of them, but it's such a small little space that I find that I just used a Word document, typed out some words, put a black box behind it, and made my word print white, printed it out on a black and white printer, and then cut them up, and I could have any saying I want. My kids all joke around all the different kinds of sayings you could say with gnomes. So I used my little elastic to clip on my hearts and my stick. Now the stick on the sign for this particular one, they're really short, so and they're actually just clothespins on the back of the signs. So I glued them onto a popsicle stick that I used black marker to make the whole sign black, and put those all together. Everything from the dollar store. Okay, let's see how our hat is holding up now that glue's dried really well around the pom-pom. And you want to just put that on, and I definitely recommend gluing it on the back and around the nose, because after you get done with your gnome, it's just, you want to grab them from the top of the head, so you want the hat glued on. Now put a little glue around the nose. Now see how that line of the pantyhose is still showing, and again, once I glue this down, it's not going to show. And this is the one time that you really do have to just hold it in place, so that sock will keep trying to pop on it's a glove, but it'll keep trying to pop off. See, this is the one time when you do have to just sit there and hold it. I've taken elastic before and bound around the nose until it's dried. And I tried doing that this time, but the problem is I just had a little elastic and it just kept popping. So, I mean, this is the one time that I am going to have to sit there and hold the nose for 30 seconds. But in this case, I was trying to do everything in real time, so I'm going to go ahead and try to one-hand my next step, which is taking some of these little plastic hearts and embellishing the hat. And I try to use different color hearts compared to what the hat is. So if it's a red hat, I use pink hearts. Pink hat, red hearts. You see what I'm saying? And definitely putting the hearts on the hat works best when you're using two hands. And in this case, I'm trying to do it with one hand with the really hot glue, and it's a little trickier than you might think. And kind of got myself a little bit there, but you do not want to let go of the stocking until it's completely set, because if you let go and it pops up, then you have to re-glue, and then it'll leave like a weird glue bump on the nose. So yeah, you really do need to keep holding that till it's really set in place. In this case, I use 3 hearts to make a little embellishment. Sometimes I use the felt for the top. You could really use just about anything. I've crocheted different little hearts that can be used in the bouquet, or it could be used on there. Anything really could go. I have some bells I've used. There's a lot of different items that the dollar store has for little Valentines. So there we go. It's getting close. Now, sometimes I put little trim around the very bottom of the hat. I use different types of little stickers. You know, they have those beaded stickers at the dollar store, and those work out really nice. In this case, my bouquet is really pretty big, so I don't want to overdo it, so I'm not going to put it on this time on this particular gnome. But as I was putting my stick on, you just want to glue it on with the arm, and here's the reason why you want your arm to be long enough. But I started to notice, wait a minute, now this is hiding my cute little pom-pom hat. I can't have that, so maybe I don't like it. And that's the thing. Every single time you make one of these, you're gonna just play with it until it looks how you like. And then, lo and behold, my little elastic popped from the glue, just like I had warned you about. The one time I didn't put a pipe cleaner on, so go back, put on my pipe cleaner. It's the thing that never fails. So we'll pipe clean it, and we're going to switch to the other arm. And I can get the glue off that other arm in a minute. So putting some glue on my little sweat sock arm and wrap it around where you can see the mitten in the front, and things are starting to come together. here's our cute little gnome. Now sometimes I'll go ahead and glue the back side of the arm too to really secure, because especially if the bouquet is a little bit top heavy, you really want that to be glued on great. And sometimes the gnomes are a little skinnier and there's room to glue it onto the bottom of the feet. But there you have it. That's our Valentine gnome. Okay, there you have it. There's my gnomes. I love putting beads around the signs. I just feel like there's so many different ways that you can make a gnome. And it's just such a fun way to brighten up somebody's day. So if you like what you see, please subscribe to my channel and come back often. I'm always updating with some new do-it-yourself project. Sometimes it's crafts, sometimes it's home improvements, but definitely come and see what I've got to offer.